Hey guys, welcome to this month's episode of This Is How to Brew It. This is where I take you through our monthly tea club prescription and show you how to get the most out of your brew. Now, this month we have a really special flavor available. It's a ancient tree gushu, ancient tree single source tea, right? This is really special. It's one old tree. You have to think that a lot of these old pu'ers, they come from a forest, they come from a patch. And so lots of leaves from lots of different trees. Whereas this is a single variety, single source, so it comes from one single tree. Now, you gotta think, old trees like this, they're typically reserved by the elite and by the wealthy and by the politicians to give as gifts and such. And so consider it's like a degree of prestige to say, that tree over there, that ancient tree, 1,000-year-old tree, every leaf that falls from it for the next 10 years, mine, right? So that's often the case for many of these old trees. They're reserved years, if not decades, in advance. And so the fact that we have access to this tea, really special, right? It's clearly the result of some family relationship or close-knit network that our buddy Sohan at West China Tea has with these families. So shout out Sohan, shout out West China Tea. This is one of their most premium top tier teas that they've been generous enough to let us sample for our monthly tea club. Now, you may have just seen I used piping hot water to warm my vessel. I'm drinking this by myself, so I don't need much. After all, there isn't much to begin with, right? This is a very rare treat, so you want to use this sparingly. Careful not to break any of the leaves because that'll give you kind of bitter and astringent notes. But again, it's just me, so I won't do too much and kind of just enough to peek out of the gaiwan here. For this, I'm specifically using a porcelain gaiwan, right? Because this is such a rare treat, because this is so specific, right? You're tasting the forest, right? You're tasting the one tree. And so sure, you could brew this in a clay pot, but then you're gonna get the minerality from the pot, you're gonna get the oils from previous brews. And so I would highly recommend either using porcelain or glassware so that you can really have a pure experience of what these teas have to offer. Okay, so I have it at angry boiling water. I have my 212 degree angry boiling water. I'm gonna rinse it, give it an initial rinse, and I'll let this sit for some time, okay? It's kind of the beautiful thing about Kung Fu tea ceremony is that it lends to slow, going slow. It's a very prominent feature in this Kung Fu tea experience, right? It means there's no deadlines, there's no pressure, you're safe, no one's chasing you. I can actually hear birds chirping, right? I can go slow enough to appreciate the subtle experience. And so while that's rinsing, I can now pour this off. Now, one thing I will say that when you're using these porcelain vessels, glass vessels, they're quite thin and they can get really hot, especially when you use these hot temperatures. So do be careful, so as not to scald yourself. Good. First rinse, we typically pour off. Now I'm wafting, I'm kind of airing it out because the steam off the decanter will be really intense. But by airing it out, I'm already starting to get some of the aromatics. And now we'll smell. Oh my goodness, that's so good. I've since brewed this a few times by now, so I have, a feel for the parameters, and oh my God, that's really rich. The best way I can describe the smell on this is it smells like the taste of sugar. It smells like the sweetness of sugar, right? Because you can't smell sugar, but there's a distinct sweetness, right? And so it smells like the taste of sweetness, if that makes sense. It's sharp, distinct, clear, potent sweetness that, wow, they talk about the nose and the taste buds being so close. It's like if you could smell the taste of sugar, that's it. So then the smell on the lid. Smoky, vegetal, green, lush. It's almost like you could smell the forest. Now I'll smell the leaves themselves. Oh, wow. So I've tried rinsing and brewing at different temperatures at this point. And yeah, I get like a cinnamony, I get like a grapey. It's really quite nice. Now, the cool part of our Kung Fu tea ceremony is that all these little elements lend to an experience, right? And while I'm experiencing all those things, my temperature has gone down a bit. And now I'm at about 200, right? I went from 212, angry boiling, to rinse and wash everything. Now I'm down at 200 or so. And I'm going to brew at that. And I'm going to brew with a flash steep. Speaking of all the things slow a moment ago, this is something that actually happens quite fast. Less than 10 seconds. It's likened to a blanch or something. As soon as I introduce that water, I pour it right off. Now, this is where I get to observe the clarity. That first rinse, it's typically a little bit murky, but here we get to see right through that golden hue, really light, very aromatic and fresh. My shifu would often joke, smell your tea first, make sure it's not urine. This is certainly not urine. To your health. Wow. So the taste, light, green, soft, delicate. The warmth, I can feel it go all the way down to my belly. And then the response, my body warms, and this is really heart-centered, specifically to the back of my heart. I could feel my back expanding. The chi quality of this, let me get one more sip. Yeah, typically with aged or fermented brews, you're going to have a very descending or kind of sinking quality. This must be a younger, I'd imagine, because it's still quite elevated, right? It's heart, so it's not necessarily in my head or anything, but common to pours is this kind of sinking, this grounded nature that comes with brewing and drinking, whereas this is still quite elevated. And I had that experience when I was brewing at the different temperatures earlier too. I'm now at about 185. You know, the temperature continues to drop, so I'm going to bring it back up and brew round two at about 200 again. I like to listen for how rapid the bubbles are going. Yep, and there's my 200. You know, I can cheat really easy with this digital kettle, but I like to listen to how rapid the bubbles go, and that's my thermometer. All right, round two, 200 degrees. Give it some light agitation, and off to the decanter you go. Ooh, that's hot. Wow, very clear, very light. Still has its full color. So it's not getting any lighter now that it's second steep. Let's see how it tastes. Oh, wow. Yeah. Now, I will say, when I first played with this, I went hot. We say a good tea isn't scared of the heat. And when I went too hot, it had a really pungent punch, you know, really strong on the front end. But now that I'm kind of brewing in the 200 range, I will say it's way lighter. I still have kind of like the leathery, kind of tobacco-y notes that become more prominent when you boil hotter. However, this is still quite tasty and very, very nuanced in flavor. Wow, but flavor aside, the chi experience, though I'd like it to descend a little more, it's still quite good. So I'd probably advise try not to drink this tea any later past 3 or 5 o'clock, right? This would be a great kind of after lunch, midday, great mental clarity, great focus, great energy to get through your afternoon. But if you drink it too late, then might keep you up. You might be a little too alert, right? And I suppose it could work in the morning too, but you know, mornings I really like my warmth to be down in my belly, right? And so this would probably be a great kind of late spring, midday, mid-afternoon kind of beverage because it's very refreshing, right, and very energizing. But maybe not so much suited for a nightcap or a morning beverage. Let's do one more. You know, for these tastings, I typically kind of just pour them off, but this is really premium tea. I kind of feel guilty pouring any of it off. I feel like I should really pay attention and be more present to this tea, considering, you know, one tree, one source, really old, probably like 500. On average, these ancient trees need to be at least 500 years old to be considered ancient. And so you think 500-year-old tree, that's not a tea bush that you got to bend over and pick these little delicate leaves from. No. This is a tea tree that you would climb into, you know, some 30 some odd feet high. And you got this 30-foot high tree, you got to think that the roots tap 3 times that depth. So 30-foot tree, 90-foot roots tapping into the southern peak of Nanua Mountain in Yunnan province, a kind of tail end of the Himalayan mountain range. This is very special. You don't want to just pour it off and waste it, my goodness. Okay, third round, let's do one more. Again, bring this back up to temperature. You want to drink these teas hot, right? It makes them more bioavailable. And you want to drink them in small sips. It kind of helps with the hydration aspect, distinct from, your Lipton iced tea that you might drink or pound to quench thirst. This is actually more about taking small sips and having more of a cellular hydration as opposed to just kind of satisfying a thirst. All right. Speaking of those kind of sweet teas and those Lipton, southern summer teas, they're kind of one-noted. You have your flavor and that's it. Whereas, when you go through these Gong Fu tea ceremonies, you have this journey of flavor expression. You have these nuances of smell from the decanter, smell from the lid, smell from the pot, smell from my cup, right? And even now, I spoke of that sweetness that I smelled earlier, but now it's almost as if that same sweetness is in the back of my palate right now. It's you don't get that from your little celestial seasonings or your smooth move throat coat, right? Your Lipton tea bag. So, the other thing too is that these teas aren't cheap. This tea club isn't cheap. It's an investment. But, here, this one session, if you will, consider if you had a matcha latte razzle drip from Starbucks or something like that, right? Once you finish it, it's gone. Whereas, the same cost equivalent breakdown, I get a pot, but I can brew it, and every time I get a new flavor. Notice that it's only getting darker, it's only getting richer. These flavors are only getting more and more pronounced. You saw how thin and frail those leaves were going in. Now you see how big and thick they open up and bloom to. So the endurance on these old trees, we're going to get easy 20, 30 steeps out of this. Try brewing your tea bag past 2 or 3 steeps, much less 20, 30, right? And so, sure, they're expensive and yet big bang for your buck. Oh my goodness. Such a pleasant brew, so light, so delicate. Yeah, I'm gonna save this through to the summer. I think that this will be really nice with maybe a cold brew. Just put 1 or 2 leaves in a pitcher and put it in your fridge overnight. You could probably even do a summer brew, right? On a really hot summer day, just kind of leave it out in a pitcher in some water during the peak sun of the day, right? And then let the environment brew the tea. That could be another interesting way to do it. So good. Well, guys, I'm going to keep drinking this through the day. There's so much more power left in these teas. And so join us again next month. Not quite sure what the flavor is going to be just yet, but check in with the newsletter, subscribe to that so you can follow up with what flavors are coming up next, among other things that we talk about in those publications. And consider joining our monthly tea club, and then you get to taste these for yourself.